Itamar Rabinovich in Tel Aviv. He's a former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. and former president of Tel Aviv University. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us here on TRT World. Now, it's quite uncommon for a sitting U.S. president to criticize the policies of a sitting Israeli prime minister, is it not?
It has not been the case for 30 years now. The last time that we had a showdown, a collision like this, was in the early 90s between Bush 41 and Prime Minister Shamir, and it cost Mr. Shamir his post when he lost in the 92 elections to Yitzhak Rabin. So it's very uncommon, but this is in all respects a very unusual situation.
What do you think this tells us about the current state of relationship between President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, President Biden is a great friend of Israel. He's been there in 50 years in the Senate. I met him personally as an ambassador at the time. I know he's a great friend. But as the vice president of President Obama, who collided himself with Netanyahu, and given his inability to influence Netanyahu's decision by friendly advice now, I think the relationship now is at an all-time low between the two of them.
And who is to blame for that?
I think mainly Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Okay, and what do you make of... yeah, please go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I said when a country like Israel has a friend like the United States, it's the most important ally and the mainstays of its national security and foreign relations. It's a luxury a prime minister in Israel cannot afford to have a row with or tension like this with the president of the United States, particularly when half of the country takes the same position as the U.S. president.
Right, but we are seeing the Israeli prime minister coming up with new measures. For example, he has delayed these reforms now, but that has not really ended the crisis. So do you believe the damage has been done and there's no way out for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
There is a way. No, definitely there's a way out. I mean, Netanyahu had to bow to the pressure, primarily the domestic pressure, not the external pressure. He postponed the legislation that is controversial. Actually, negotiations between the government and the opposition parties began last night. There is not a great deal of mutual confidence, but the two parties, I believe, came into the meeting with a genuine will to find a compromise and to settle. I think a compromise is feasible. Some changes in the judicial system are required. No one contests that. We think the government went too far. And if the government is willing to tone down its reform, a compromise could be found.
When you say compromise, do you mean a compromise with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in power, or a compromise which includes replacing the Prime Minister?
No, he doesn't have to go. He can stay in power. But the main issue, the main bone of contention is the government's plan to control the appointment of judges by the reigning coalition. And this is not acceptable to many inside Israel and outside, because we think judges should not be appointed by the government. There should be really a separation between the three powers, the executive, the legislative, and the judicial, and this should be kept. It's a mainstay of Israeli democracy and democracy in general.
Ambassador Itamar Rabinovich, thank you very much for talking to us here on TRT World. Really appreciate your taking out the time.
You're very welcome. Thank you.